I'm actually going to introduce two people.
Caroline Tatum.
Okay. The first person I'm going to introduce is Caroline Tatum, who I know as Caroline, and I didn't have her last name written down, so I'm like, oh, it's Carol. So Caroline Tatum is actually making the formal introduction for Réamonn here today. I'm very pleased to have them both here. Réamonn is part of the Armagh Rhymers, who unfortunately were unable to join us this year, and it would have been a real treat if they had been here at the festival, hopefully in the future. So I'm going to turn it over to Caroline Tatum and Réamonn Ó Ciaráin.
Thank you, Margaret. Hello. Hi, friends. So we're very thrilled to be here. As Margaret mentioned, Réamonn is working with the Armagh Rhymers of Armagh. He's come here from Armagh to share the oldest story that's been an oral tradition in the Western civilization. So he is the newest author of these ancient stories, first in Irish and also in English. So his books are available in the tent next door. So he's coming from Armagh. This is the ancient capital of Ireland, and he is the regional manager of Gael Linn. So he works with preserving the Irish language and these ancient stories. And the artist Dara Vallely, his paintings are featured in the books and also here. He is the director and founder of the Armagh Rhymers. So this story is ancient, but that doesn't mean it's over, because this story was prophesied over a millennia ago to be on the lips of every Gael anywhere that they were gathered together, which is here and now. So I'd like you to say the name of this ancient hero with me. His name is Cúchulainn. Cúchulainn! Woo! Okay, so now I welcome Réamonn Ó Ciaráin with the story of Ulster's greatest hero, Cúchulainn. Here you go.
I am delighted to be here with you today, and thank you, Margaret, for inviting me, and also Caroline for your kind words of introduction. I have a lot to get through in the next 40 minutes or so, and Fergus Mac Roy, one of the legendary heroes of Ulster, not Knights of the Red Branch, but heroes of the Red Branch. Knights were from a different era. And Fergus Mac Roy was the most virile man in Ireland, and he fell out with the King of Ulster, Cruthair Mac Niassa, because of the way Cruthair had the sons of Uisneach killed over the Deirdre of the Sorrows affair, and Cúchulainn had nothing to do with that whatsoever. And Fergus Mac Roy went into Aer Lingus, which is into exile, and you all know the term Lingus and Aer Lingus. And it's an excellent title for people who are going into voluntary exile and into forced economic exile. But Fergus Mac Roy was Cúchulainn's foster father, and he, we are told in a later Christian text, appeared to King Loigra in the 6th century, and he told the story of the cattle raid of Cooley verbatim, and it took him 3 days. He appeared to Moran and told the story of the Tyne Bow Cúchulainn, and it took him 3 days, and I have 40 minutes or thereabouts. So I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm going to tell you a little bit about mythology and Irish mythology. I'm going to talk about the people we have in these stories. I'm going to tell you a little about the places involved, very important. I went to a writing workshop by Michael Harding. He writes in the Irish Times. He wrote a book entitled Staring at Lakes, and the first lesson he told us that day was, get your place in there. If you want to make a story authentic, get the place named in the first sentence, and how right he is. So, places, I'm going to talk about some of the exploits of Ireland's greatest hero and Ulster's greatest hero, and I'm then going to finish off by discussing how the spirit of Cúchulainn has indeed influenced people, Irish people, all over the world. And every time that our country and Irish people are in travail, they awaken the spirit of Cúchulainn. So, let's talk about mythology for a wee while. Every night that you all go to sleep, you enter into the same space from where we get mythology. Mythology, as a person who has greatly influenced the way I think, and when I first read his material, I wasn't too sure, but the man of whom I speak is the poet and philosopher John O'Donoghue, and he spoke about our mythology being more important than the dead cage of fact. And I firmly believe that. And John O'Donoghue is no longer with us, but I'm glad to say that there are schools promoting his ideas and philosophy today. He's the gentleman who wrote the book Anam Cara, which is a very significant notion in our mythology, and I'm going to be talking about Anam Cara later on. So, every night, you, in your dreams, you may not remember your dreams, but you do go somewhere. And it's when you have dreams, well, they're your personal myths. So, gather your personal myths together over centuries, and then you get the mythology of a nation. And Geoffrey Gantz, not of this specific parish, but born in the US of A, studied in Ireland, well, he put it very well. He spoke about these mythological tales being achingly beautiful, and I would add achingly powerful also. Carl Jung tells us that our mythological tales are a mirror to our egos. And some of you out there may in fact be children of the ego. And when you read mythological tales across the world, it's a way we have, a narrative way of explaining the cosmos. It's almost, Einstein did it with his wonderful, concise theory of relativity, E equals mc squared. Well, the storytellers over millennia do it with their powerful stories, and none more powerful than Irish mythology, which can stand shoulder to shoulder with the Greek and Roman myths. Now, I want to take you across the Atlantic Ocean to Ireland and to the 5th century when Christians arrived. And one thing that's important to say, that was a bloodless conversion. And probably one of the important reasons why it was a bloodless conversion is that the Christians, led by St. Patrick, well, they knew exactly what to do. they brought the Druids into their tent. They brought the Druids into the monasteries. And what you got there was former Druids working on Christian scripture, and when they got a little bored, they began to engage in what we call marginalia, scribbling little notes down on the sides of their scriptures, which is very, very important to us today. And they were allowed to do that. They were, I suppose, fed and watered to record the stories of Christ, but they were also allowed at that time and encouraged to write down our native tales. And our native tales are influenced by the classics, no doubt about that. We didn't steal their stories. Our stories were influenced by them, and we can indeed say that Cúchulainn, the main person, the foremost hero in Ulster, is the Irish Achilles. Now, our stories went on to influence the Arthurian ledgers and indeed the Norse mythology. So I can say to you here today that we don't know where Camelot is. We have an idea that it's in the borderlands between Wales and England. But I can tell you that we do know where the Irish Camelot is, and that is Navan Fort. So Navan Fort, where these stories are centered, the spiritual home of these stories, that's Navan Fort. Navan Fort equals Camelot of the Arthurian legends. Crother MacNeasa, the young and Ulster hero, well, that's King Arthur. Cúchulainn, the main man of this book here, well, he is Lancelot or Gawain. Cúchulainn's great lover, Emer, that is Guinevere. And significantly, Bricera na Changa Nivnya, or Bricera of the evil tongue, and there's one of his type in every audience and in every community, well, that is Merlin. And I'll say it one more time, Bricera na Changa Niva, Bricera of the evil tongue. And every time you see a portrayal of Merlin, they do this sort of squeaky little slimy voice. So there has never been a full version of the stories of Cúchulainn portrayed for the big screen. We have had animations, so it's a story, and you're going to find out now shortly, this is a story really that needs to be told. There's a lot of wisdom in it, and that will maybe bring me on to the central character in the what we call An Ruaíocht, or the Ulster cycle, a collection. Some say it's 50, others say up to 80. Depends what way you divide them all out, but there are, it's one of the most extensive corpuses of oral vernacular literature. And I'm going to talk now a little bit about the man himself, the foremost hero, and that is Cúchulainn. Well, Cúchulainn, he was born 3 times. And one time it involved his mother, Jaichinera, ingesting a small insect in a drink, which is a symbolic way of telling what actually happens. And he was born in a few different ways, at least 3 times. We have 3 different accounts of Cúchulainn's birth. Significantly, like many heroes in the international mold, Cúchulainn was semi-divine. And one of the key messages of Jesus Christ was, in fact, that Christians are semi-divine. In fact, in the Lord's Prayer, it says, Our Father who art in heaven. So if you say that prayer, well, you're also suggesting that there's a semi-divine element to you yourself when you say that. So, miraculous birth and also semi-divine. He had an earthly mother and a deity for a father. Incidentally, the deity he had for a father, well, that was Lu. Lu is the god of all arts, which we are celebrating here at Milwaukee Irish Fest for sure. We still, I believe, have a sort of a polytheistic view to the world around us. The gods that we worship today might be the god of power, the god of celebrity, and the god of wealth. I suggest to you here and now that the stories I'm talking about, well, they revered nature around them and the cosmos and the stars. Nowadays, we do not pay enough attention to two gods in particular: Poseidon, the god of the ocean, and Helios, the god of the sun. And we need to get our people to start paying more attention to those two gods. It was a strong message in the Odyssey, and it's a strong message from me here today, but of course you all know that. So, now, I want you to relax, because I've been firing a fair degree of detail at you, and now, the gentleman before me, Niall Keegan, well, he played music. What I'm going to do is tell some stories. The first story I want to tell you that comes from this wonderful book, and it is the story of how Cúchulainn, the Hound of Cullen, also called the Hound of Ulster, took up arms. And taking up arms to this very day is a very important day in the life of a young man or a young woman, because, well, you can take life or draw blood, and that is a big responsibility to have. So, Cúchulainn, at this time, he had his boyhood name, Shidanda. Could you all say Shidanda? Well, it has been anglicised to Setanta, and you may be aware of the sports channel Setanta, but it was originally Shidanda, which is, ladies and gentlemen, even a better name for a semi-divine hero than Cúchulainn, because it means knower of ways and roads. And when he slew the hound, and the reason why I'm not telling you that story, because you all know it, he became Cúchulainn, the Hound of Cullen. But he was a wayfarer. He knew the way, the best way for himself and his people. So he overheard that Ard Drí, the chief druid Cathú, who was also his grandfather in some versions, he heard Cathú saying that whichever boy took up arms on this day, well, as Caroline pointed out, the name of that boy will be on the lips wherever Gaels gather together, and his name is on the lips of Gaels at least 2 millennium after the events took place in the imagination of our people. Okay? And the chief druid wasn't directing his comments to Shidanda, we'll call him Cúchulainn. Cúchulainn heard the whisper that speaks to each and every one of us several times throughout our lives, calling us on our hero's journey. And Cúchulainn heard it. Most people don't hear it. I would encourage you all, if there's any message in these stories, it's listen to the small quiet voice calling out at special times in your life. And it's calling you on your own particular journey. So Cúchulainn said, well, I'm going to take up arms today, and no ordinary arms would do. He broke all the arms that were given to him. Only the king's arms were good enough for him. The king's shield, the king's sword, the king's chariot, because he was going to be special. So there is maybe a lesson in that. If you want to do great work, make sure you've got the right implements. And he has taken up arms now, and this is where I go into the narrative. And he headed out to make the first kill, a very significant thing to do. And he travelled over slave food, visited by Owen MacNeill, who issued the countermand on Easter 1916. And he made his way to Clan Neachtain. So if you know any Neachtans, this is the type of the Neachtans. They slew more Ulster men than were left alive. So Cúchulainn decided to take up worthy opponents. A very significant notion. Not any opponents. We're not talking about snuffing out any old opponent here. We're talking about taking on worthy opponents. Very important idea. And he beheaded the 3 sons of Neachtain and decided to make his way back to Auanwaha, Navan Fort, the spiritual home of Ireland. To this very day, the 2 main religions have their cathedrals there. And on his way back, he went into his warp spasm for the first time. His warp spasm involved one eye going out on a stalk, the other eye being sucked away back in, the muscles revolving in under his skin, his liver fluttering down his throat, his jaw distending, his hair spiking up. And you know something? The women folk of Navan saw this arriving, because not only was he in his warp spasm or going through a berserker from a later era, he also had caught a very powerful stag and he was bringing it back alive, tied to his chariot. He also had stunned 20 wild geese and attached each single one of them to a string. And here he was making his way back to Navan Fort with his charioteer and his anam cara. They seem to have shared a soul almost. Laig chided Cúchulainn when he wanted him to perform greater deeds. And we all need a friend like that in our lives. Somebody that will chide us on to greater, not somebody that will tell us what we need to hear. We need an anam cara like Cúchulainn had in Laig. So picture the scene. This scene has never, to my knowledge, been portrayed in art until Dara Vallely, who has performed at this festival a number of times, did it. It's a very powerful image, and the women from Navan Fort decide to go out bare-breasted. And nudity is nothing, female nudity is nothing new in the pursuit of your martial aims. The men seem to do it with spears and guns and tanks. Well, even in Nigeria, in the War of the Women, they decided to strip off and embarrass the colonists into accepting their logic. And here we have the women in Navan Fort trying to bounce our great hero out of his warp spasm. They put him into one vat, which boils over. Such was the intensity of this young man's fury. They put him into the second vat, and it steamed up. In the third vat, his composure was restored, and he was allowed to enter the court of Cruthair MacNeasa, and he spent his time then close to the knee of Cruthair MacNeasa. So, in keeping with this part of the talk, the biography of Cúchulainn, he went on to single-handedly defend his province of Ulster, and there were 5 provinces at that time. The one in the centre was Meath, where the 4 provinces came together, and the 4 other provinces ganged up on Ulster. And the men of Ulster, the warriors of Ulster, well, they were enduring the birth pangs of the curse that the Maha goddess laid on them for making her race against the king's horses while heavily pregnant. It's a very, very evil thing to do, especially for entertainment. Maha, Tommy Sands mentioned this to me out there on the street a short while ago. Maha is a goddess of the earth. The men of Ulster persecuted Maha, made her run while heavily pregnant, made her give birth to her twins, thus naming Owen Waha, the twins of Maha, thus making Maha lay a curse on them. And you know something, ladies and gentlemen, as Tommy Sands said to me earlier on, to this very day, we are persecuting the earth. Now, single-handedly, because he was free of original sin almost. He was free because he was not part. He wasn't even in the. He wasn't one of Clan Ruairi, and he was free of that. And he had to hold back the advances of the Connacht men and women, and entourage and slaves. And he did this single-handedly using a sling. So he did it from his trademark trumpeting rock. And if you ever want to visit Cúchulainn's trumpeting rock, you will not be able to find it. The older people used to go there. It's in County Louth, in a place called Belurgan, overlooking the mud flats of Morhevnia. I know where it is because it took me a long time to find it. It's now called Tipping's Rock, and there are no signs to it. It has that extra energy that you find at places like Dolmens and in graveyards. It's a very special place. Nobody goes there. And it has evaded the clutches of Google. And I hope in a way that that continues. So Cúchulainn stayed up there, and he had to stay up there for months, holding back the advances of the Connacht men under Maeve, the intoxicating queen, because she wanted to steal the brown bull of Cooley, which was in Ulster at that time. It's now in the Republic of Ireland in County Louth, not so that she could equal the wealth of her husband, but that she would have greater wealth. So we have strong women, we have Machiavellian women in these stories, very interesting women, and Queen Maeve was capable of doing anything to get her ways, even offering her daughter to warriors were they to defeat Cúchulainn. So he's absolutely exhausted. He's the only man in Ulster who is not suffering the birth pains, and they deserve to suffer these birth pains after what they did. But he really is exhausted, and he calls out to his patron for help. And every so often we all reach a point in our lives when we have to call out to our spiritual patron. And Lu, the god of all arts, answers and makes his way through the battlefield towards the rock of which I spoke. And you have to be careful what you pray for, because Lu arrived and said, and I'm going into a bit of narrative here, "Sleep now, my son, and I will watch over you for 3 days and 3 nights." And Cúchulainn drifted off into a drowning wave of slumber. And when he was asleep, Lu anointed him with healing herbs. Many of these herbs go into making chemicals which are a colossal price today. Back then, they knew how to make them themselves, and all his wounds, and there were many wounds, healed. So much so, after 3 days and 3 nights, when Cúchulainn arose, he wanted food and the company of a woman. And he suddenly remembered where he was, and he asked, "How long was I asleep?" And Lu said, 3 days and 3 nights. "Then it is no favour that you have done me, for the Connacht men will have had their way for 3 days and 3 nights. "Not so," Lu said, "for the boy corps of Auanwaha came, and they slew 3 times their number, and then they too were all killed." But it wasn't the tragedy that we might apportion to it today, for like when Black Elk speaks, it was for them a good day to die in the protection of their province. And Cúchulainn flew into a rage. He got his weapon of ultimate mass destruction, his scythed chariot, which bristled with cutting blades and ropes that ensnared the opponents and crushed their bones, and in one telling emitted a poisonous vapor. And these are not unlike weapons of destruction that we might find on the modern battlefield today. So, Cúchulainn was then to actually marry his great love, and his great love was Emer. And Emer had to have the special attributes of a lover good enough for the greatest hero in Ulster and all Ireland. And her attributes were purity, sweetness of voice, embroidery, wit, wisdom, and youth. So, looking around me here today, I can see that all the ladies here would fulfill all those criteria. Maybe not everybody could do the embroidery, but the others you would nail no problem. And, you know, all things were going very well. And at the night of their wedding feast back at Auanwaha, things were going exceptionally well. But remember Brickaroo of the evil tongue? He, and there's one in every group, you know, he said, "Isn't the king entitled to prima nocta in our ancient law tracts? And because he had said or invoked these ancient law tracts, well, something had to be done about it. So they decided to send Cúchulainn off to expend some of his vast energy, gathering all the creatures from the mountain of Slieve Fuad. And what they decided to do was, yes, to fulfill the ancient law tracts, but what they did was somebody knows, I can see somebody knows where this is going, they decided to put 4 in the bed. They put Conall Cearnach, Sancha, Shancha Mac Alilia, Fergus MacRoy, Emer, and the king, so that Cúchulainn's honour would not be blemished. So they did, in fact, it's a way that we all to this day can use to reason out intractable issues by using our wisdom. And Shancha Mac Alilia was an entertainer, almost like an ancient rhymer, like the Armagh rhymers. His surname, Mac Alilia, son of Alil, is in fact the exact same as Dara Vallely, the artist who did the paintings in this book, and also the leader and founder of Armagh rhymers. And it was said of him that he could resolve all the wars in the nation with a few of his wise words. So, now, let's talk about some of the Geishena. Geishena are taboos or prohibitions. So, we all have prohibitions. Some people don't like walking on the lines on the walkway. Others don't like walking under ladders. Well, Cúchulainn was prohibited from being awakened out of his sleep. So any men recognize that? Well, one time he was awakened from his slumber and he took a chess piece and threw it right through the forehead of the hapless man who woke him up. He also had to sleep with his head equidistant from the ground as his feet. So I think there's something in that. I think we should look into that and see if there's some medical benefit of being equidistant, head and foot, from the ground. He was prohibited from eating dog meat, which is sound enough to me. He was prohibited from marrying any woman whose blood he had imbibed. And in actual fact, that particular taboo came into play when he threw a stone, killing a wild swan at Strangford Lough in County Down. When the bird fell to the ground, it turned out to be a beautiful lady, and he went down and sucked the stone out and accidentally drank some of her blood. She was mad keen to marry him, but that was his get-out clause. He invoked that taboo. So, just incidentally, lest I forget, and we're talking about love here, Cúchulainn fell in love with another world lady, and it was always said that Cúchulainn was never, ever unfaithful to Emer, his great love. In fact, they're buried together. Not at the same time. She was buried later outside Dundalk, and a standing stone marks that place. I've been there many times. And but Fan was from the other world, and she visited Cúchulainn with another lady, and the two ladies proceeded to whip Cúchulainn at a standing stone, so much so that he actually left left this world and visited the other world, and there he fell in love with Fan, so much so, ladies and gentlemen, that he withered away and almost died. And we get in these stories the best description of depression that I know of. It's very dark and it's very mysterious, and it lasted for a year, and he didn't eat and he didn't speak, and eventually he comes out of it. He comes out of it when his foster son, Louis of the Red Stripes, is to be king at Tara, and he gives him this wonderful, wonderful advice that would be excellent advice for any leader until this day, all about being sensitive to strangers in our midst, and listening to the old people, and to holding firm to what has been agreed in the past. Very powerful, but mainly it's all about being charitable and welcoming the guests into your tribe. So, Fan and Cúchulainn decide to meet at Newry, at the yew tree, the ancient yew tree that gave its name to Newry. And Emer found out about this, and she decided to gather together quite a few of her lady friends and give them all very long, sharp knives to kill the other world lady Fan. But when they get there, the two, it is very clear that the two are so much in love with this great hero that what they do is they argue and bicker with each other to be dumped. Because they both loved the hero enough that they wanted him to be so happy and didn't mind being dumped by him. So that was the influence of this great hero, Cúchulainn. But he had three faults. The three faults that our great hero had was he was too young, he was too beautiful, and he was too brave. So they are blessings, but they are also a curse. Now, I'm keeping a wee eye on my time here, so I'm just going to have to move on. And some of the recurring themes that we have in these stories are our hero being alone and following the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell spoke of, being very much in tune with nature and in tune with the elements, being of the land. And ladies and gentlemen, we are all, each and every one of us, from the land, from the soil. For me, my clay is Ireland, and I'll be going back to the clay of Ireland. And for many of you, your clay is Irish. And this is an important note to make, that these stories are very much about being in tune with nature, not killing animals for the want of killing them, just taking what is necessary. And Cúchulainn was very much a creature of the elements. And these stories, the elements, make up everything in the universe, including our thoughts. And that's why these stories help us to connect with the basic elements. So we get treachery, we get jealousy, we get greed, we get a lot of bloodletting. But there's a very soft side to the cattle raid of Cooley also. And as I draw, I would like to say a lot more, but as I draw to the close, I'm going to tell a few stories. And Cúchulainn has been on the plains of Muirthemne, which is in County Louth, near the whereabouts of Dundalk. I have driven. Muirthemne means the magical territory under the sea. There's an estate, a housing estate there, Muirthemne Moor. And when I was driving around in my car, which told me how high I was or how low I was compared to sea level, I was more often at sea level or just below sea level when I was driving around Muirthemne in Dundalk of today, which reminded me that there's more to these places than just naming them. They actually mean something in modern, in those times. They were named for a reason, and naming is very important, very significant, and the mythology is a way that our people name the territory around them. So, Cúchulainn engaged in single combat with many, many opponents, not least his erstwhile friend, Ferdia. They fought a prolonged battle and a bloody battle for 4 days. And eventually Cúchulainn slew his best friend Ferdia, but there was no great joy in that victory. And others came to attempt to kill the great hound of Ulster in single combat. One such person was Cúchulainn, who came, yes, to do single combat, but you know something? He brought his 27 nephews and a cousin of theirs, and they attempted to slay Cúchulainn, but they couldn't. And you know something? Eventually, Cúchulainn slew Cúchulainn, and Cúchulainn's wife gave birth posthumously to Cúchulainn to sextuplets, and they went and learned the dark arts, and they were hideous sextuplets, and they got poisonous arrows which they give to Louis Montgomery, who threw it. It glanced off Cúchulainn's special horse, and animals were very sacred. His horse, the Liawaha, could cry beads of blood to alert her master. She was a mare. And here we have, so I'm coming to the end here, here we have Emer, Cúchulainn's great lover, waiting on the plains of Muirthemne to get some indication of how her great lover, and then she sees the Liawaha coming. But hold on, it's not Cúchulainn on the Liawaha, it's Cúchulainn's Anam Cara leg, and she knows women have the sense, the fifth or sixth sense for these things. She knew that her great lover was lying in a pool of blood, and unfortunately they took his head off for a war trophy. We still have war trophies being taken all over the world where battle ensues. And they asked Conall Cearnach to go and retrieve the head. And when they eventually retrieved the head, they washed it and gave it to Emer, Cúchulainn's great lover. They placed it into her arms. Needless to say, she's forlorn. And she takes the head of her lover, her young lover, to her breast. She sucks his bloodless lips. She drinks his cold blood. And she places the head back on the shoulders, and she says what must be the most powerful saying in all these stories. She says, "There is not a woman, married or single, in Ireland or in Scotland or in the whole world that was not jealous of me." Jealous of me until this day. And what woman would be jealous of Emer with the great lover lying on the ground? And my final 3 or 4 words is that when Cúchulainn appeared to King Leagra, and he was entered into heaven because he became a Christian, and he encouraged King Leagra to adopt St. Patrick's faith, he gave King Leagra, this teaching. It's important for you all. It's my final word here today. Cúchulainn said that we all should be, and Leagra in particular, a boy amongst boys, a man amongst men, victorious on the battlefield, strong in the face of satire, and even stronger in the face of praise. Guracéad Maigov tan leor file. This book, there's not too many of them, I really mean that. There's only a handful in the corner of the literary corner. Beautiful, beautiful, powerful images. I am so happy to be here. I've travelled 4,000 or 5,000 miles, and I feel as though I really have, in a way, come home. Guracéad Maigov.